Welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. This is your host, Cartwright Morris. This is the podcast for men wanting to learn from their experience. If you're trying to understand more about what you're going through in your work, your family, or community, this podcast for you. We tell real life stories of men who have gone through hard things in their life and overcome them and become out better men. And has led to more success in business, has led to more meaningful relationships, and overall a better life. So if that's you. Check out this podcast as well as menareforged.com. All right, welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I once again got a great episode today. I've got a fellow coach, which I'm excited to interview him and him as his process. He's a few steps ahead of me. Been doing this a while. Coach Ryan Horn of the Extraordinary Man podcast. So please go check out that podcast. But Ryan, it's great to have you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the intro.
Absolutely. So you're out, Ryan. I love just kind of giving a little bit of backstory to my audience. I know you're a Minnesota guy. So yeah, if you would just kind of give us a plug, a Vikings fan, of course, I'm sure, right?
I am. It's off video, but I have a giant Vikings logo on my wall.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, got to go Vikes, right?
That's right. This is the only place my wife would let me put it. So,
so what's your opinion on Brett Favre?
I loved him when he played for the Vikings.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, you're loyal to a point. I got it. You hated him for probably most of his career, but there was a season. Okay.
Yes.
He did kind of ruin y'all's one little Super Bowl chance. That cross the body throw. Anyway, we won't go there.
That was painful.
Yeah. So yeah, Ryan. Give us a little bit of where you grew up. What's your background? Who were some of your big influences growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, from Minnesota, originally from a really small town in northern Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I grew up. And I loved sports growing up. So sports influenced me a lot. I played basketball and football all throughout high school. And I looked up to a lot of sports figures growing up. And coaches, my high school football and basketball coach were really big mentors for me. But I was also very entrepreneurial growing up. So when I was about 11 years old, I convinced my mom to order these calendars from this fundraising magazine. And I literally went door to door and sold them. And was constantly just thinking about different ways to make money or businesses. But ended up going to college because I thought that was what I was supposed to do, even though I didn't know what I was going to go for. Didn't really have a plan, and eventually figured out that, like I said, I loved athletics growing up, loved working out, and I loved helping people. So I was like, how could I combine all that together? So my plan was to become a strength and conditioning coach at a college. And I was on that track about my junior year. I think it was around the end of my junior year. I read this great book. It's called The Education of Millionaires by Michael Ellsberg. Great book. This guy interviewed a couple dozen millionaires and billionaires that didn't graduate college. Some of them didn't graduate high school. And really, it just hammered home the importance of self-education for me. And it also re-sparked my interest in entrepreneurship. So I decided that after I graduated, instead of going and trying to find a job, I was going to start my own personal training business, because then you can control where you work, how much you work, how much you make, all those things, which sounded awesome to me. So I graduated college, moved down to where I currently am, the Twin Cities here in Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, and attempted to start my first business. And very quickly fell flat on my face, learned some lessons the hard way, let's just say, because I didn't really know how to market and I didn't really know how to sell, despite the fact that I was very skilled. I mean, there's not very many personal trainers that have a degree in exercise science. So I knew my skill set was good, but I just didn't understand the business side of it at all. So about 3 months in, I'd made about $200 total. And at the time, I was sleeping on my aunt's couch. She lived in the 60-plus condo community. So I was technically not allowed to live there. So I'm literally sneaking in and out every morning and evening, and not an ideal situation, right? But I needed to make some money. I had all this student loan debt that was about to come due. So I go to an employment agency and they placed me at this metal factory and I was working 12-hour night shifts from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. for $9 an hour. And yeah, you said it, right? That was, I went from just graduate college, like, oh, I'm going to go start this business and make six figures the first year. And then here I am in this metal factory. And that was tough. It was definitely a humbling experience. I'm grateful that I went through it, but it wasn't very fun at the time. And so that was my life. And I was in the metal factory one night. It's about 2:00 in the morning. And I remember I was sitting there in the break room and I looked up at the clock and I realized that it was my 23rd birthday. And that just hit me really hard. I was like, man, what am I doing here? Like, God, this was not the plan, right? And I just felt like I was living so far below my potential, and like I was letting everybody around me down. And it didn't feel very good. So I kind of sat there, felt sorry for myself for a little bit, but then I made a really powerful decision. And what I've learned since then is that you can actually take the pain from situations like that and use it to fuel you forward. And that's what I did. So I made the decision that I was going to finish out my shift at the metal factory, quit and go restart my business, learn the skills that I knew were missing, and basically make it successful or die trying. And so finished out my shift at the metal factory, quit, and went and restarted my business, found some mentors that taught me how to market, how to sell, and also dove headfirst into personal development. Started doing a lot of mindset stuff and uncovering things that I didn't even know were issues. And about 3-4 months later, I was making enough money to move out of my aunt's place. By no means was I crushing it, just kind of barely paying the bills. And it was really frustrating because for about a year or a year and a half after that, I stayed kind of stuck right in that same place. Despite the fact that I was reading all these books and doing all these courses, and I felt like I was working really, really hard, but just staying in that same place of mediocrity. And my next breakthrough came when I hired my first coach. And despite the fact that I didn't feel like I could afford it at the time, I knew I needed to do something to change things up, because I felt like I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, I've been working really, really hard, doing everything I think is going to work, and it's resulted in me being in just the same spot, basically. Right. And so hiring that first coach was absolutely huge for me. Not only did my business get much better, I doubled my business the next year, but my whole life got better. And so that really opened my eyes to coaching and that whole world, and got me very interested in it as well. And the second really powerful decision I made, which was only about 2 weeks after I hired my first coach, was I decided to, again, despite the fact that I felt like I couldn't afford it, I decided to fly to Miami, Florida for a one-day mastermind with two of my mentors. And these guys were both 8-figure earners. They were crushing it in business. And so it was me, those two guys, and I think 9 other people in a room all day. And that was huge too, because I got to see how these guys think. I also got to see, their backstory. They were no different than me. They were making a lot more money than me. But getting their brain on my business too was absolutely huge. So those two things totally shifted things. And the business was doing great after that. But I had this thing like coaching. And so I started going to all these different personal development events. I was meeting lots of people, and I started coaching some people for free, just for fun. And at first it was like, everybody, whatever your problem is and whoever you are, let me help you. And so I did that, and I realized I loved coaching. And long story short, over a period of a couple of years, I felt like I was being called into coaching, despite the fact that my personal training business was doing great. I loved it. And so 2018, I started my current business, which is called Extraordinary Man. And primarily I do one-on-one business coaching. I also am a speaker, an author, and as you mentioned, the host of the Extraordinary Man podcast. And a couple of years ago, I created a framework that I use for my coaching. It's called the 5-Step Business Breakthrough Framework. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but that's a little bit more of my backstory.
Yeah. So I am curious, Ryan, now with your perspective and all that you've been through, from the failures to being around big thinkers who had a similar backstory to you, how would you now approach college?
So, yes. So for me personally, I definitely would not have went to college. I mean, there were a lot of great things about college, right? But I mean, and it depends on the person, right? I can't just make a blanket statement and say, like, nobody should go to college or 95% of people should go to college. But for me, if I could go back in time, I definitely would not go to college.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not like a different perspective in it. You just would just start that, your training, position much sooner.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, depending on what you want to do, if you want to be in business, my advice would not be to go to college. I interviewed a guy on my podcast recently who he was in business for a while. And then I think 2008, his business failed because of the economy. And then he ended up going to college. He got a degree in marketing, and then he got his MBA, and he graduated like top of class. And he was like, man, I wish I could go back and tell myself not to do that, because I don't use any of this stuff that I learned from there. Like, I wish I could go back and use that money to invest in myself and find somebody really successful in business and then learn directly from them. Yeah. And I feel the same way about college for me.
So being around all of those successful entrepreneurs and business guys, what do you feel like is the thread of their training that got them to be successful? What is the common denominator?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is definitely perseverance. When, especially today, you look on Instagram or social media all over, like, there's tons of people saying you should be an entrepreneur and, hey, I can help you at seven figures in 6 months and this and that. But starting a business and making it successful is way harder than I think the average person realizes. Like, it's going to take longer than you think to be successful.
Yeah.
There's going to be way more obstacles than you realize. So you have to have perseverance, because if you go in thinking it's just going to be easy, you're going to get a reality check and you're probably going to end up quitting. So that's one big thing. The other big thing I would say is they all found a mentor. Like, none of them did it on their own. In the first couple of years I was an entrepreneur, I tried to do it on my own, and it didn't work so well. So those are the two big things I would say.
Yeah. And so, like, you talked about getting a coach, and what would you say is something that mentor gave to you that you probably couldn't find on your own?
A lot of things. So one of the biggest things with having a coach, I think, is they have a pretty unbiased opinion of your life. They're not in your life, right? And even if you become friends with them, whatever, it's kind of like, I love the analogy of, it's like you're driving in a car, but you have no mirrors in the car. So all you can see is straight in front of you, but your coach is in the helicopter up above you. They can see all around you. They can be like, hey, there's something coming up behind you or on the left, or have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? So that's one of like the most valuable things. But I mean, there's a lot of things that's great about having a coach.
Yeah. So I am just kind of curious. I mean, again, I think a little bit macro, even from just like moving from a young man wanting to business to starting your own business. How else have you seen just some of those principles, even just like in the context of stepping into adulthood and becoming a man, and what does that look like for you, or how you've seen really, men really grow and step into who they are?
I think a big thing is for men stepping into manhood is leadership. Like, we're called as men to be leaders in every area of our life, whether that's, you're starting a business, or you're getting married, or you have kids, or whatever. We're called to be leaders. So I think that's a great way to measure kind of where somebody's at. If they're still, regardless of how old they are they still kind of like in boyhood or in man? Like, are they stepping into that role as a leader? But does that answer your question?
Yeah. Like leadership. So like, I mean, like there's a level of responsibility they take ownership of. And I mean, and even leading on a personal level before leading in like a family or a business. And so
absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, cause I know there's something that you mentioned, marriage. I know you got kind of your start coaching was men in marriage. What was some of the practices or things you learned through just coaching, that kind of being your entrance into coaching men was through, in their marriage? Today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you, because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors, not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Yes. So it's so interesting. My wife and I both love marriage. And I mean, we did a ton of marriage stuff before we got married, and we have every single year since we've been married. We go to at least one marriage conference per year. But it's very, very interesting because I would say the one biggest thing is that men think their wives think the way that they do. And the opposite is true. Your wife typically thinks that you think the way that your wife does, which is completely wrong. It's completely backwards. Mm-hmm. So that's where I see a lot of issues happen, but also men not stepping up as a leader. And a great definition within marriage and really anywhere for leadership is that it's about initiation. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it all figured out, but just initiate, take the first step. I mean, women love when you do that. So that's one thing that I would say.
Just taking the first step, initiating that I think of that in itself, like you can really compound that, like, because I think men, right, we do wait around to initiate. And so when you say initiate, is that in the context of date night, responsibilities? So really kind of unpack that a little bit more.
All of the above. So a classic example would be if you're driving around, or maybe you're planning on going on a date with your wife, and she's like, where do you want to go? And instead of you just initiating and saying something, like saying anything, even if it's a place she hates, then she's going to tell you she hates it. But instead, you putting it back on her and saying, I don't know, where do you want to go? Like, women hate that. They hate that. So if you're doing that, stop it. Right. But that's kind of the classic example. But honestly, it's in every area. Women want you to step up and lead, whether it's spiritually, with date nights, whatever.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So let's jump back in your story a little bit, Ryan. So you got in this coaching, being exposed to that mastermind, entrance into like coaching men in marriage. So really unpack how you really kind of cut your teeth on creating your coaching program.
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes is that action brings clarity. So the thing is, like I said, when I first started coaching people, I was coaching literally anybody. They didn't have to be a man, didn't have to own a business. It was anybody about anything. But as I started to do that, I started to realize, okay, I really like coaching men. I really like coaching, people in this position. I don't so much like coaching people like that. So that's a big tip, I would say. If you're not clear on, where you want to go with whatever it is that you want to do, just start taking action, because you're never going to figure it all out before you get started. We want to, but it's not going to happen. So just get moving and get started, and then you'll kind of get more clarity on that. So I did. I started coaching men, helping them with their marriages. What I realized very quickly is that pretty much no man will seek out another man for marriage coaching unless his wife's already said, hey, I want a divorce, or like they're not even living together. So it was a very interesting time. I'm glad I did that, and I learned a lot. But man, I felt kind of like I was living in a soap opera, to be honest with you. But it made me a better coach. And the great thing is that I can use a lot of the situations that I took there. Like, I still do marriage coaching. I just happen to be a business coach, right? Because all of your life is connected. If you have a great marriage, it's going to reflect on your business. And if you have a terrible marriage, it's also going to reflect on your business. So, when I start coaching somebody, yes, they come to me for business. Yes, I'm going to help you with your business. I'm going to help you grow your business. But my goal is to help make your whole life better. So honestly, I just figured it out by taking action, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a process of working with people and realizing, again, I like working with this type of person. I don't like working with this type of person, and it's still happening. It's not a finished product. I don't think it ever is, but I'm still kind of refining things. So that's how I got to coaching men and helping them with their business specifically versus just coaching men and helping them with their marriage or whatever else.
Yeah. What do you feel like is your like secret sauce? What I think you said that coaching men in marriage made you a better coach. What about that made you better, and what's kind of your secret sauce as a coach?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that made me better by coaching men in that position in their marriage. One of them was I felt like I had a lot of pressure on myself because I had guys coming to me that are like, "Hey, my wife said she is like leaving tomorrow. Like, what do I do?" And so it put me in these stressful situations and helped me. It really kind of battle tested me in that way. Mm-hmm. But it also, I think one of the great things about business is that when you see innovation, a lot of times it's somebody taking something from, it could be a totally different industry and then implementing it in a different industry where within this industry, it's never been seen before. So I love looking at that and seeing how that affects things. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it was just the experiences. That was the biggest thing for me. But my secret sauce, I would say, is my framework. Because I've been to lots of events. I've been to lots of masterminds and head coaches and read all these books and done all this stuff. But then sitting down, and this was not an easy process for me to do, but basically by doing all that, I realized that there are patterns that lead to success. There's patterns that lead to failure, right? But how do you put that into some type of, 5-step framework or something? Yeah. And it took me a while, but I did. And now that I have the framework, I can look back at my life and say, okay, well, when I had a breakthrough in my business, or I had a breakthrough in this area of my life, I can look back at the 5 steps that I've created now, and I can see all 5 steps in there. It might be in a slightly different order, and there may have been different tactics used for different things, but I can see all 5 of those steps. And I could pretty much do that for anybody. If they've had a breakthrough in their life, they've went through these 5 steps in some way, shape, or form. So that, I would say, is my secret sauce.
So don't leave us in suspense here, Ryan. Come on, give us a little a teaser here, or give us some those 5 steps there.
Absolutely. So I'll give you the 5 steps, and then we can definitely dive deeper into each one if you want. But the 5 steps are: number 1 is clarity, number 2 is commitment, number 3 is coaching, number 4 is courageous action, and number 5 is course correction. So, like I said, if you want to dive in a little deeper on them, we can.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said action leads to clarity. So you sounded like this was something that you went through yourself. Yeah. What about each point that was kind of unique to you? Like you said, you started taking action, getting clarity. I can't remember the next one. What did you say?
Yeah. So it's clarity, commitment, coaching, courageous action, and course correction.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. It's commitment. What does commitment look like?
Yeah. So here's the thing. You have to be clear first, because if you're not clear on what you want, then, how are you going to even know if you achieve it, right? So that's step number 1. But once you're clear, that's not enough. It's like I said, business is a lot harder than most people realize. So when you come up to those brick walls, if you're not 100% committed, eventually you're going to get tired of trying to push through those brick walls, and you're probably just going to end up quitting, which is what happens to most people. I don't remember what the stats are, but like 80% of businesses fail within the first year, I think.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty important to be committed. So I look at commitment as kind of 3 different parts, and there's lots of different things you can do to be committed. But to me, it's leverage, accountability, and focus. So leverage, basically, there's only 2 reasons that anybody does anything. If you boil it down to its most simplest form, it's either to avoid pain or to gain pleasure. And once you understand that, you can use that to your advantage. And so when somebody jumps on a business breakthrough coaching call with me for the first time, I take them through a process where we go through the potential pain of not following through, of not hitting your goals, and also the potential pleasure of following through and hitting your goals. And it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So that's leverage. Step number 2, accountability. To me, accountability is the missing bridge between information and application. Because how many times, and I'm going to raise my hand right now, but how many times have you heard some great information and then you didn't apply it?
Right.
Right. All of us have. But when you have accountability, you're going to be way more likely to. And the problem most of us have is that we're trying to hold ourselves accountable. And if that's you, I can already predict your results. And then there's kind of the next level up, which is maybe having a friend or maybe your wife or somebody like that to try to hold you accountable. It's better than yourself, but it's still only going to take you so far. And that's probably not going to be very far. So the best kind of accountability is always professional accountability. So coach or some type of mastermind or group coaching or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the last one, focus. So what you focus on a daily basis will either make you more committed to achieving your goals or less committed. And so a lot of people are just kind of stumbling through and, they get up in the morning and they're just, what do I do? Right. So it's good to have some great habits that are going to take your focus and make you focus on what you want so that you're going to be way more likely to achieve it. So I focus on 3 things in particular with my coaching clients. So number 1 is a vision board. Mine is literally right behind my computer right now. So don't make it complicated. Just put some images that mean something to you that you want to go after. I just have one word or a short phrase under each one, something you can look at quickly, spend a minute or two, visualize what it's going to be like once you've achieved it. That's number 1. Number 2 is actually writing out a declaration letter, which is basically just the ultimate vision for your entire life. So I break it down into different categories, right? You have like your health, your marriage, your business, etc. But I would break it down into at least 3 or 4 categories and then write out a little paragraph of what's the ultimate vision for that area of your life. If it's health, what do you want your body to be like? What do you want your body fat percentage to be like? How much do you want to weigh? How much energy do you want to have? Those types of things. And try to get as descriptive and specific as possible. And you also are going to write it out. The reason it's called a declaration letter, you're going to write it out as if it's already happened with I am statements. So that's powerful. Either reading through that every day or what I've done and what I have a lot of my clients do now is record a version of it, audio. Because how many times you wake up in the morning and you just don't feel it? Like you could sit there and just read through it and be like, oh, okay, I'm reading through my declaration letter. It's probably not going to do that much for you. Yeah. But if I have it on audio and I've recorded it with passion and excitement, like I don't have to be passionate and excited. I can just press play and then listen to myself when I was passionate and excited reading through it. And it gets me back to that state again. So that's number 2. And then the third one is I've created something I call my power questions. So it's 6 questions that I ask myself every single day. So typically in the morning, you can ask them any time of day, but in the morning tends to be best. And basically these questions help to rewire your brain because naturally we don't look at things positively. We tend to look at what we didn't do, what went wrong, and those types of things. So these questions are all geared towards helping you rewire your brain and also focus on the most important things for that day. Because we all have 100 things we would like to get done, but it's not going to happen. All right. So instead, focus on the few most important things that are going to move you forward. Yeah. So that's focus.
Man. Dang, that there was a lot of good little nuggets in there. How do you, the 6 power questions, because I think that's something as men, we're not willing to ask the hard questions. How does someone, and it sounds like from what you said, it's got to be catered to you. What's the 6 power questions for you? And how do you help men articulate those hard questions?
Yeah. So, what I see a lot with new clients when I give them these questions initially is some of the questions are really hard to answer. So I'll just give you a couple of the questions as an example. One of them is, what did you achieve in the past day? Right. Yeah. The thing with a lot of guys is that if they didn't achieve something big, they can't think of it. They're like, nothing. Yeah. I didn't accomplish anything yesterday. Well, that's not true. So if that's you, which again, most guys struggle with this in the beginning. Once you've done it for a while, it becomes easy and you can write down 20 things a day. Break it down and make it smaller because you're making it too big. You're saying, oh, I didn't do anything yesterday. Well, that's not true. If you got out of bed, that was an achievement. So break it down and make it small, and then it will become easier. But the more you do it, again, the easier it will be. Another question is, what were some special moments from the previous day? So this is breaking it down to, as much as possible, an actual specific moment versus an achievement. So like an example could be, I went on a walk with my wife and she made this joke and we were both laughing really hard, right? Because then you literally are, as you write it down, you're reliving those moments. And so you are getting yourself in such a positive state. You're reading through all of these things you achieved from the previous day, all the special moments from the previous day. The last question is, what are your top 3 outcomes for the day? So you're laser focused on the 3 most important things. But again, this is like a compounding habit. The more you do it, and the more you do it in consecutive days, the more powerful it gets. Like if you just did it once, it would be helpful. But if you did it every day for 6 months, your life would be drastically different. Again, because we think about what we didn't do, what went wrong, or what is wrong. And so it starts to change literally your brain and what you think as kind of a default.
Yeah, we become our worst critic. I feel like a lot of times I have a coaching client, there's an exchange for their guilt and shame that they're not a good enough man. They're not good enough in business, not good enough here. Like that self-worth is just being beaten up constantly. And like, I guess from what you're saying, it's just creating that practice of like, man, you're doing so much already. You have so much responsibility. You're showing up, you're right. And for some reason I guess it's like, it's our training growing up, whatever. That's what we've been around. That's how you articulate how to get better. It's just constantly being aware of what you suck at or what you have been failing at. And so let's go back to the 5 here. You said, so clarity, commitment, coaching is 3. Yep. And what was 4?
Courageous action.
Courageous action. Yeah. I really wanted to unpack that one a little bit because I think there's something to that, especially if it's hitting that, the inner critic.
Yeah, absolutely. So courageous action, this is a huge one, obviously, because if you don't take action, nothing is going to happen, right? So this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road here. And what I've found is that the bigger your goal is, or the bigger the vision you have for your life, the more courageous action you're going to have to take. So, and the thing is, it's not just going to be like a one-time thing either. Like you're probably going to have to take a lot of courageous action, and you're probably going to have to do it consistently. So what I see a lot of times is people are stuck here. They maybe even know exactly what they should be doing.
Yeah.
But they can't get themselves to do it, or they can't get themselves to do it consistently. And that can be a really frustrating place to be. Now, what I've found is a lot of people, they jump in and try to go straight to the courageous action. And this is why it's step number 4, not step number 1. Because typically, I would say probably every case I can think of, when somebody is stuck there, they're not taking the courageous action, or they're not doing it consistently, it's because something is missing from steps 1 through 3. Either they're not clear enough on what it is that they want, why they want it, they're not committed enough to making it happen, or they don't have a high enough level of coaching to make it happen. So when you have those 3 things in place, I mean, you still have to be the one that takes the action, right? Your coach can't take the action for you, but it makes it a whole lot easier in my experience.
Yeah, that's really good. So, I mean, if you're a guy out there and this is resonating with you and you're in business or wanting to go in business, I recommend going to coachryanhorn.com and do a discovery call. But also, like, I think there's Ryan, for my audience who may be resonating in that area, late 20s, early 30s, this is mulling in their mind. They've kind of just, they've similar story to you or similar story like me, where it's just kind of, they're just kind of going through the motions, thought they're doing what they're supposed to do. What would be a great episode on your podcast where they can just, really get that trigger point and maybe step into that clarity and even commitment?
That is a great question. Man, I would say, to be honest, just about any episode is going to be great, because I really love diving into people's backstory. When you have somebody on that's made $100 million in business or something, but then you get to hear, okay, well, this is what it was like the first 10 years he was trying to be in business. He failed at this, he failed at this. And I think it's so important to hear people's backstories, because it's easy to look at somebody that's successful and say, oh my gosh, well, he just must be lucky or it must be nice to be him, right? But I have not met a really successful entrepreneur or person for that matter that has a high level of success that does not have a backstory that involves a bunch of those things, right? It's not just like, this guy is just super amazing and special. He just tried this one thing out and, now he's making $100 million and his whole life is amazing. Like and that's another thing too. I think we think that people that appear to be successful, whether it's financially or in any other area, that their whole life is great, which I've talked to a lot of millionaires and multimillionaires, and that's just not the case. Everybody has issues and things that they're always dealing with. They just don't publicly project it, right?
Yeah.
So a big issue for men is that they feel like they're the only one, right? I'm the only one struggling in my marriage. I'm the only one struggling with my business, or I'm the only one struggling trying to figure out what my purpose is. And that's just not true, which is why I think a really big thing for men is don't isolate yourself, despite the fact that you're going to want to isolate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. God, taking that first step of just vulnerability, feeling like, no one has gotten successful on an island in a vacuum. And man, that's so good. So Ryan, I appreciate you coming on. So for my audience out there, I have mentioned CoachRyanHorn.com, but we'd love just to, share my audience where they can find you and, maybe like something that they would be helpful for them.
Absolutely. So my website that you mentioned, CoachRyanHorn.com, is the best place because it has links to everything that I do. So I have a free Facebook group that you can join if you're interested in that. The Extraordinary Man podcast, like we already mentioned. And definitely, if you're a man, you own a business, and you want to break through to the next level, there is a coaching tab at the top. You go fill out a short application. And what I would love to do for your audience, if they mention that they came from this show, if you're one of the first 5 men, I will make sure that you get a free 60-minute business breakthrough coaching call with me personally.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, jump on that, everybody. Well, Ryan, man, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast just even getting to know you last month, but also, man, somebody who's trying to engage and equip and help men in a similar space, man. I appreciate all that you're doing, and I hope everybody goes out there and gives him a 5-star rating on the Extraordinary Man podcast and checks out his website. So, Brian, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Men Are Forged podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can go check out episode 101 with Chase Riplogel. Similarly, Chase has a brand and a mission towards helping men, a lot like Ryan. So you can go check out episode 101, how to know what motivates you as a man. And he had a lot of similar ways to help you understand more about yourself, more about how you can grow in other ways in business, leadership, family, and relationship. So go check out episode 101. And as always, I appreciate you listening, and I'll see y'all next time.